Okay.
Başlayacağım. Buyurun.
All right. Professor Haim, welcome to the Kanoon Iranian Cultural Association weekly programs, and we are very glad to have you. We have the opportunity to have another session with you in last year, and now is a good time to talk about Gaza and the situation that's going around the world. Before I start your program, let me tell the programs of next 2 weeks that we have in the Kanoon, and then we're going to start your program. Just my apology, I'm going to announce it in Farsi. دوشنبه 23 مارس دکتر ولی سیادت، خیام شخصیت ادبی و نقش تاریخ سازش در ریاضیات و نجوم. دوشنبه 30 مارس بحث و گفتگو پیرامون شرایط کنونی و آینده ایران از 3 منظر چپ، جمهوری خواه و مشروطه خواه. کاوه دادگری، عطا هودشتیان، احمد مظاهری. این برنامه‌های 2 هفته آینده ماه مارس هستش. Now I'm going to introduce Professor Haim Bresheeth-Zabner. He is a distinguished political scientist and versatile intellectual, currently serving as a professor research associate of a School of Oriental and African Studies, which is a prestigious public research university in London, England. This institution is renowned for specializing in the study of Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Professor Haim is going to talk about Gaza today. Professor, you have between 50 to 60 minutes for your speech. And after your speech, we had a brief statement by our human rights groups. And then after that, we're going to start question, answer, and comments on that. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak to you. I think this is an important meeting for me because I speak a lot in Anglo-American circles, but to speak to Japanese scientists from across the world is, I think, very important. And I'm very glad to have this opportunity. Now, for those of you that have not met me before, I'm an ex-Israeli. I'm Jewish. I grew up in Israel. I wasn't born in Israel, but I grew up in Israel. Both my parents survived Auschwitz. And we came to Israel when I was a baby in 1948. And we then lived for about 15 years in the home of Palestinians who were basically expelled to Gaza. The whole of Jaffa, where we lived, was expelled to Gaza. And we lived in the homes of Palestinians. So I'm no stranger to the difficulties that Israel has caused from its very first day, or even before its first day, to millions of Palestinians. Now, when we fixed this talk, Israel was involved in one war only on the Palestinians in the whole of Palestine, of course, not in Gaza alone. And since then, Israel started two new wars. As you are fully aware, an illegal war on Iran, and a bit later, another illegal war on Lebanon. Israel is the only country that started too many wars since 1948. We can't really very easily count the number, because some of those attacks on Gaza in 2008-9, in 2012, in 2014, in 2019, in 2021 were wars in their own right. So Israel alone started more wars than all the members of the UN together. This is quite an achievement, I mean, a negative achievement. So I want to start with Gaza, because that is the most incredible genocide in our lifetime. And I will then have something to say about the other conflicts that Israel has started. In all of those three wars, the West is supporting Israel. Of course, the US is its main partner in crime, but not the only one. United Kingdom, where I live, the whole of the EU, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and some other countries are supporting the genocide in Gaza, and also the other wars. I want to start by saying that the genocide in Gaza is very unusual, and I would talk first for about 5 to 10 minutes about the incredible innovations, if you want to use that concept, that they have introduced into the crime of genocide. I'm a historian of genocide myself. I've written books on the genocide against the Jews in the Second World War and on other genocides. So I'm well aware that there were more than 60 genocides in the last 200 years. So genocide is much more prevalent than we would like to believe, or we would like to see. But genocides on the whole are not done in the way that Israel has done this one. So I'll go into some of those characteristics that separate it from other genocides. Now, this is definitely the most public genocide that ever took place. First of all, it was very long. It's not totally finished, and it can, at any point in time, continue on a high volume, which at the moment it's not. At the moment it's a low volume genocide. But this has happened many times since October the 7th, 2023. What do I mean by the most public? It is an online genocide. Both the Israelis and the Gazans in Palestine have shared with us what they are doing and what they are facing. This is not normal. This was not the case in most of the genocides until now. Not just because the technology is available, but because nations that committed genocide until now kept it very secret. I know that about the Holocaust. The Holocaust was kept very secretly from the people of Germany and the German partners in the war. They didn't know what was done in their name. They knew that Hitler and his party were very anti-Semitic and didn't like Jews, wanted to get rid of them by shipping them to other countries out of Germany. But most Germans had no idea that millions are killed in special facilities built for that, because those facilities were kept top secret. There was never a visit to any of them from any other body apart from the SS. Of course, the International Red Cross never found out about it until it was too late. And the Nazis would not have allowed a visit there anyway, even if it was if it became known. They wouldn't allow a visit and wouldn't admit it. The Germans were also very secretive in their genocides at the beginning of the 20th century in southern Africa, of the Herero people and others. Nothing came out until the genocide was finished. In other words, until all the Herero were killed. So the idea that the genocide can be totally public, online, televised, shared on the global media, on every technological method of getting news and current affairs. So little children are now watching other children being murdered. They can, if they have a telephone and their parents are not wise enough to block it. You know, my next door neighbor is a little girl of 3, or she was 3 when the genocide started. She's now 5. And she asked her parents in my presence, Mommy, what are we going to do if the Israelis come to London? So, you know, little children now are living with this genocide. We are all living with this genocide because it is so public. Israeli soldiers made it a habit of blowing up special facilities for the birthday of their wife or their children. I don't know if you've seen any of that. It is totally disgusting. What they do is they have a camera on, for example, a university or a hospital that they wish to, that the order was to blow up. And then they stand in front with the camera pointing at them and say, my dear wife, for your birthday, I have a special present. And they press the button and the hospital is no more. This has never happened before. This kind of public sadism and pride in the crime is a totally new phenomenon. And I hope and wish that we'll never see it again. But I'm worried that this is the beginning of something quite terrifying. So this is also the most sadistic and traumatic genocide. And I think we can say that it's also the most democratic genocide. What do I mean by that? I mean, no nation that commits genocide takes it to the population and asks for the population to agree. Of course. The Germans didn't even tell the population in Germany that they're doing a genocide. Neither did the Turks that did genocide against the Armenians. And I could go on, but you understand what I'm arguing. Israel is doing everything in the full light of day. And Tel Aviv University, 2 years ago, almost exactly in March and in April, had 2 polls. There was only one question, and only Jews were asked for an answer. Of course, there are 2 million Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, but they were not asked because their views are not important, apparently. So Israeli Jews were asked, I think 11,000 people were sampled. So this was a very large sample for a population of about 7 million. So those 11,000 people were asked only one question. Do you think that Israel is using in Gaza just the right amount of force? This is answer 1. Not enough force. This is answer 2. And 3 is too much force. And they had to choose one answer. 97%, I'll say it again, 97% of Israeli Jews thought that Israel is either using the right amount of force or not enough force. 54% were those that said not enough force. Okay? So, even communist regimes struggle to get 97% of the population to agree to anything. No democracy can do that. But Israel is a special type of democracy. It's a racist democracy for Jews only. And they managed to get 97% of the Jewish population to agree with the genocide. This has never happened before anywhere. So I think we can say it's the first democratic genocide. Now, as opposed to, for example, the genocide that my parents were involved in Auschwitz, the normal genocide are not done by the whole nation in modernity. I can tell you that to kill 20,000 people in Auschwitz every day, every 24 hours in Auschwitz, 20,000 people died. This was, it hardly changed. It never went down. It sometimes went up when they added another gas chamber. So there were 4 gas chambers and 4 crematoria, and that was enough to kill 20,000 people every 24 hours. Now, how many people do you think the SS allocated to Auschwitz? Very few actually did the killing. Less than 200 people operated the camp. So less than 200 people killed 20,000 people every day, because most of the work was done by the inmates. Jews and others that were the inmates of Auschwitz were used by the Germans to take the bodies, to welcome the prisoners, to burn them in the ovens and so on. So with very few German SS personnel, you could do that. And of course, all the other camps worked on the same model. That meant that the danger of the murder of so many people in those camps becoming known to people was very small, because the SS personnel were very disciplined and believed in what they're doing, and there were very few of them involved directly in the destruction. The destruction was mechanized and industrialized. Now, what has happened in Gaza is the opposite. The Israelis took more than 350,000 soldiers that were in and around Gaza, participating in this. Of course, most of the killing actually happened from airplanes, from jets, yeah, with the 2,000-pound bombs. But a lot of the killing also was done by tanks, by machine guns, by even handguns, by the 350,000 soldiers that Israel has allowed in. That meant that it's not just a democratic genocide, because the whole nation is actually participating online and so on, but actually a huge amount of Israeli men and women participated personally in the genocide. Obviously, it was a very consensual genocide. I told you the statistics, so there was no demonstration, there was no political action against the genocide, and there isn't now, apart from every now and then, about 50 people, this is the total number, 50 people, sometimes 80 or 90, try to demonstrate against the genocide, and the police immediately arrests enough to frighten them off, and they never actually do the demonstration. I think it's quite safe to say that it's the most hated genocide across the world. Zionism didn't have a lot of support before the genocide, but now it has very, very little support, much less than in my lifetime. I'm almost 80. I have never seen such revulsion as against this genocide in Gaza. Quite rightly. I think it's also the most expensive genocide. The genocide the Americans conducted against two Japanese cities in August 1945 was, before this happened, the most expensive genocide. It cost about $2 billion to build the two bombs. Some of you are probably scientists in the areas of physics and nuclear physics, and you know what it meant. Yeah, it was a very expensive genocide with thousands of people working on the bomb. The Israeli genocide is already costing more than $40 billion. And this is before we start discussing the little issue of rebuilding Gaza. And before rebuilding can actually start, we need to clear the rubble. There are more tons of rubble in Gaza than were created in Europe during the Second World War, in the whole of Europe. So that gives you an idea what we are talking about. By the way, Hamas claims that about 76,000 people died in the genocide, because these are the number of names it has. This is a terrible underrepresentation of the genocide. I can send you a whole number of articles that prove that the number killed is few hundred thousand. So this is also probably as destructive, if not more, than the genocide in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's the most destructive genocide because apart from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and few other towns like Dresden in the Second World War, normal genocide do not destroy towns, villages, hospitals, For example, yes, about 5.5 million Jews were killed by the Nazis. Just under 6 million Jews were killed by the Nazis. But I want to tell you something that most people don't know. There was, before the war, a very modern Jewish hospital in Berlin, the capital of the Third Reich. And that Jewish hospital remained open throughout the Second World War. While Jews in millions were killed, there were 3,000 Jews that remained in Berlin during the war. It's too long a story to tell now, but please accept that there were a few thousand Jews in Berlin during the war for very many reasons. And those 3,000 Jews used that hospital for 6 years between 1939 and 1945 because they were not able to get support from any other hospital. That was the only hospital, the Jewish hospital, that would accept Jews. So you see, even during such a terrifying genocide like the Holocaust, the Nazis did not destroy the homes of Jews. They gave it to other people. They did not destroy the hospitals. They did not destroy the schools. They did not destroy the whole system that Jews were using. Sorry, somebody is trying to ring me on. I just have to stop this. Apologies. I don't know how to stop it. Allow me just to say I can't take it. Right. Okay. So what we've seen in Gaza is the destruction of the whole city, not just the Gaza city, but everything built around it. In other words, in the whole area of the Gaza Strip, all the housing was erased. All the schools were erased. 11 universities and colleges were erased. Every facility providing water, electricity, gas, anything, telephone lines, the telephone exchanges, the telephone masts for, basically everything that was created since the 19th century was wiped out. There is nothing left in Gaza to support life. This has never happened before. The power of destruction is 12 nuclear explosions of the type that were thrown on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yeah, in other words, 6 times the destructive power that Japan had to face. This is in a very small area where 2.3 million people lived. The area is, very much less than a quarter of Tokyo. It's a smaller area. So we're talking about a destructive force that the world has not seen in our living history. So what is involved is the genocide is made of herbicide, in other words, the destruction of the city, domicide, the destruction of the homes, scholasticide, the destruction of every type of education in Gaza, from kindergarten to university. Medicide, all the clinics, all the hospitals, all the medical facilities, and indeed, most of the doctors and the nurses were targeted and killed. All infrastructure supporting life was, then Israel has forced the Gazan into starvation. The trauma that 2.3 million, well, now it's less than 2 million, of course, suffered, has not been suffered since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And of course, there is an info side, if you want, or media side. About 300 journalists of press and media were targeted and killed. This is more than all the journalists in all the wars of the 20th and 21st century together. All the journalists killed in all the wars of 125 years are less than what the Israelis killed in Gaza. I think it's also the first AI genocide. There is a very famous piece of AI software called Where is Daddy? And that is the targeting software that found people to kill them with their children and wife and parents and so on. This was based on the idea that the best place to kill someone that they target is at a home. And because it's based on telephones, and Israel has all the phone numbers of everyone in Gaza, so it was very simple. And, bombs from planes were actually homing in on this system only when the person was at home, so that they will be killed with their whole family. We've seen that in Iran. For example, the killing of the Ayatollah was done at a time that his whole family was there. So this is how it works. This is an AI software. It produces what is called a bank of targets. In other words, tens of thousands of targets all the time. If we did it by hand, by people, it wouldn't be very efficient. So this actually was done on the Microsoft and Google cloud systems. Microsoft was pushed to remove the account or part of the account of the targeting, because it created such an international furore when this was found out that Microsoft is doing that on its targets. And Microsoft announced to the world that it didn't know what is done on its servers, because the contract was with the Israeli army for a number of years, but they said they didn't know that the Israeli army uses it for targeting practice. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. So the latest technology was used not just to kill, but to manage the killing process. It also led to a kind of Hollywoodized, media representation of the killing process. So this is a genocide not done to Jews, which was the situation in the Second World War, but a genocide done by Jews to others. And of course, this is not the first time that colonialists are genociding the population. You would know that in Australia, in South Africa, and in South America, Central America, but more importantly, in North America itself, where now Canada and the United States and Mexico exist, in this area, between 18 and 20 million people were genocided over a period of 200 years. So this is not the first colonial genocide, and of course the British have used genocide as a method of control and so on, but it's definitely the first one in our own lifetime. And I want to end by saying, talking about the special features of this Gaza genocide. This is also the first genocide that was done in the name of anti-racism. Israel said that what Hamas did on the 7th of October was anti-Semitic. What they are doing is anti-racist. This is an innovation which I can't even comment on. I mean, this is too much. But it happened, and is still being used as an argument. And the most important thing that was destroyed is not life or something like a house or a hospital, but something that cannot be seen, but is very important. What was destroyed is international law. International law has the Genocide Convention of 1948, and you know that the person who actually is responsible for it, Philip Lemkin, a lawyer, a human rights lawyer in the 40s, in the 1940s, was this is his project for life. Yeah, he has worked on this, believing that if you developed a legal procedure and a legal framework against genocide and made it the worst crime that can be actually affected by humanity, there will be no more genocide. Well, he was wrong. But there is the whole legal system, which also part of it is the ICC and ICJ, the two highest courts on earth, and they both have to have the responsibility of bringing states and individuals. Each of them is responsible for another part. Yeah, the ICJ deals with states, and the ICC deals with individuals that are genociders. And those two crucial, important high courts in The Hague in Holland are part of the machinery that polices and prevents genocide. The first time that it was used on a non-third world country was this time. South Africa has complained about the Israeli genocide to the ICJ, and the case is still ongoing, but we know that ICJ, few months after it heard South Africa's case, decreed that Israel is suspected of genocide, of what they called a plausible genocide. In other words, the proof for the genocide was there. And they're working on it. Not very well, by the way, because both the ICC and ICJ judges and officials were all sanctioned by the United States. Therefore, they don't have anymore a way of moving between countries. because most of the countries in the West would not allow them to come in or to go out. They have lost their banking, credentials. They've lost their credit cards, and members of the family were also sanctioned, as were other UN officials like Francesca Albanese and many others. In other words, this is a very interesting system. You do a genocide, and if anyone, like a court, a legal system, a UN lawyer appointed to stop such things like Francesca Albanese, if any of them opens their mouth or does their job, you sanction them, and they can't really actually live normally. So this is also a new and terrifying development that the Israelis and the United States have invented. And to come to the end of this talk about Gaza, I want to think about our possible reactions to what is happening there. Now, one of the reactions that you would have expected did not take place. For example, the Genocide Convention, like any legal convention, has a range of sanctions that the UN should impose on any country or society which genocided anyone. Okay? The ICJ and ICC both announced sanctions against Israel. For example, Netanyahu is wanted by the ICC. Israel should have been out of the occupied territories 2 years ago, according to the ICJ, and so on. So there is a list of sanctions which are available. They're not very draconian, you understand. No one will be killed as a result of those. There's no such a possibility at all. But Israel was asked to vacate all those areas that it took in 1967 because it's illegal. To stop the genocide because it's illegal. To stop the starvation because it's illegal, and so on. Israel's done none of that. And the main sanction would be, for example, removing Israel from the UN General Assembly. Israel isn't really not a member of the human race. If it does this, it has no right to be in the UN. Alone, it broke more UN resolutions than the rest of humanity put together on its own. So I'm saying this as an Israeli. I mean, this is totally unacceptable as part of humanity. It is totally out of human range of reactions and violence. So you will remember, probably, those of you that are near to my age, that in 1975, South Africa was removed from the UN General Assembly because of the crime of apartheid. The crime of apartheid was very serious. Also, there were a lot of killings involved in South Africa, but never did they use planes to bomb cities. Never did they use the destruction of cities like in Gaza. Never did they use denying water, electricity, etc. So when Archbishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela visited Palestine in the early 2000s, they both said that apartheid South Africa was bad, but compared to Palestine, it was nothing at all. and that what is happening to the Palestinians under the Israeli jackboot is hundreds of times worse than what was happening to the blacks in South Africa. This is what the two important leaders of South Africa had to say about it. And they also said, no one is free until the Palestinians are free. And we should never forget that. So, if it was true and right to remove South Africa from the General Assembly in 1975, why? And it remained removed for 20 years. Okay? It was not a member of the UN for 20 years until 1995, when it was received back under Mandela. Now, if it was right to do it then, it's 1,000 times more right to do that to Israel now. And my question is, why wasn't it done? Because all our governments have done nothing about it. The government that I live under in the UK, the American government, all the governments of Europe, all the governments of the West, Japan included, the governments, the powerful governments on this world have done nothing at all to punish Israel with the symbolic punishment of removing them from the UN. What they did, though, is continue to finance the genocide, continue to arm the genocide, continue to support politically what Israel was doing. So this is what the West has done. We now have 2 million or less than 2 million Palestinians without homes and without any facilities. And Trump built a board of peace. I mean, just the name of it should shame us all. A board of peace with war criminals on it, like Tony Blair. And this board of peace is supposedly acting to rebuild Gaza. You know what? They haven't built even one unit of habitation. They haven't rebuilt anything in Gaza. Nothing at all. And people are living under the stars, some in tents, and some are living in the rubble of their destroyed houses and destroyed schools, destroyed universities. This is what is happening now, and this is not likely to change as long as governments are not doing anything. And I want to mention some other groups that are not doing anything. The Arab world, supposedly supporting the rights of Palestinians, has actually helped the genocide. If Egypt was not playing the role that Israel has written for it, it would be much more difficult to do this genocide. There was no call from any Arab country to sanction Israel. Instead, they have new agreements every year working together with Israel. I think this is terrifying. The only country that supported, apart from South Africa, that did the work with the ICJ, the only country that offered some support to Palestinians was Iran. So Iran is now under attack, of course, because that's what it has done. But for other reasons that I would want to come back to. The EU, as a bloc, continues to support all that Israel and the US are doing. Not just in Iran, in Palestine, in Yemen, in the Horn of Africa, in Qatar, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and of course in Iran. Now, BRICS. Let's come to BRICS. BRICS is, the future. A lot of us think of BRICS as the future. Quite rightly, I'm looking forward to the day that BRICS will start organizing the mess left by the West. But it hasn't done much to achieve that. BRICS, as a group of countries in the third world or in the global south, call it what you like, has done nothing to stop the genocide. It has done nothing to bring Israel to justice. Israel has total impunity. It's the only country that has total impunity because we are allowing it to happen. So what is left to humanity now that it's lost even the machinery of international law? Because let's face it, international law can only work like any other law if it has sanctions and if it has universal jurisdiction. In other words, if two people steal money, one is punished and the other one is not punished at all, the legal system will fall apart. Yeah. In the current situation, the only people who are punished are the people policing the crime. The ICC, the ICJ, the UN, all the people who are policing crime are suffering sanctions. All the murderers, all the mafiosi, all the guilty are the ones who are offering the sanctions, operating the sanctions, implementing the sanctions. So I think assuming that the people on this webinar support international law, I would be surprised if this is not the case. And of course, I do so myself. If you support international law, you cannot but disagree with a system, a legal system that is not operating the sanctions in the same way against all criminals. No system that says this criminal I actually like, and I'm not going to apply any sanctions to, because it's my criminal. Your criminals, we will punish, but our criminals will not be punished. That is not a system of law. That is a system of abusing the law. Now, what I think we need to do is to understand another thing. And this is why this is allowed. So a few words about Israel, because before I come to my conclusion. Israel is a settler colonial state which was created when other settler colonial projects were being wound down. In 1948, India and Pakistan were granted independence from Britain in 1947, actually, at the same time that the UN decided to divide Palestine totally madly, totally illegally and immorally. India and Pakistan got their freedom from the British Empire. So you see a very interesting situation. The global colonies that Britain and other European countries held were freed in the 40s and in the 50s. By 1960, all the colonies were free. And so Israel is starting its colonial project at a time when we understand everywhere that colonial projects are wrong, that they should be stopped, that people should be freed from the colonial control. That is the point that Israel is starting its colonial project. So it's a neo-colonial project. So that's the first thing which is very unusual about Zionism. The other thing about Zionism is that it's, and this is one reason why it should have been stopped rather than assisted, it's a very racist project. It's a very Islamophobic project. It's specifically the project now supporting Islamophobia. My current work as a historian now is all about Islamophobia. And Israel and Zionist historians outside of Israel, Jewish Zionist historians outside of Israel, did all they could to make Islamophobia as popular as it is now. If you live in Europe, you know that what we have as a dangerous racism is not anti-Semitism, but is Islamophobia. I've lived in London for almost 61 years now. And I have not met a real anti-Semitic event more than once. I was there when somebody was being anti-Semitic to another person. I have met, I don't know, probably hundreds of events of people attacked because they are Muslims. And not just Muslims, but Arabs who might not be even Muslim, but they might be Christians. But because they are Arabs, the assumption of Islamophobes is that they are Muslim and therefore they should be attacked. And of course, this is well behind the attack on the Palestinians. It was well behind the attacks on Arab countries that Israel has carried out and continues to carry out. It is behind the attacks against Hezbollah and Hamas. And by the way, according to international law and human rights law, every population under occupation has the right to fight with the force of arms against the occupation. Just look at the universal law of human rights. This was based on the fact that in many European countries, and in my family as well, partisans fought against the Nazis in the Second World War when the Nazis took over their societies. So international law allows resistance, armed resistance, to illegal occupation. And of course, the occupation of Palestine is illegal. The occupation of Lebanon is illegal. So those occupations can be and are resisted by force of arms. Of course, you can't compare the arms that Hezbollah or Hamas has to the arms that Israel has. Of course, Israel is, an empire compared to them. They only have very light weapons, but their right to resistance is protected by international law. You might not agree with what Hamas did on the 7th of October. You might think that you don't like that. And I am a person who is against every form of violence. But I have to admit that international law allows them to defend themselves. They can't really defend themselves because they're not strong enough to do that. But they're doing what they can. So I have to admit that, even if I don't like any violence, which I do not agree with. I'm a pacifist. So we have now a situation that Zionism is the only settler colonial projects left, which is active, which is violent, and which this brings me to the last point of my talk. You probably have heard the concept of Greater Israel. Greater Israel is, if you want, the flowering, the full development of the Zionist project. And if you Google Greater Israel, you'll see a map. There is a map which is accepted by all the historians dealing with it. And the map is basically a biblical map. It is based on the Hebrew Bible, in which God, I don't have a relationship with God myself, so that you know that I'm an atheist, and I think that God is, of course, a human invention. But even those people who you might be part of that believe in God don't believe that God gave them a land registry certificate. Okay? You can't really come to your neighbor and say, listen, God has promised me your flat, and now I've come to take it. Or your car, or your money, or whatever. Yeah? This is not an argument normally acceptable. What Zionism is saying, and Zionism is not even a religious movement until very recently, and the joke which is very popular in Israel is most Israelis don't believe in God, but they believe that God gave them Palestine. So that is the kind of twist of mind that they are doing. So Zionists are not all Israeli and not all Jewish. In the United States, there are 60 million Christian Zionists. I don't have time to talk about this, but please do a search about Christian Zionism, and you will be shocked, if you didn't know already, what they plan to do. And their plans are based on the fact that Jesus will come again, and when he will come again, all Jews will go to hell, apart from 4,000 Jews that will survive and become Christians. So this nonsense is a nonsense that 60 million Americans believe in, including the current ambassador of the United States to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who, speaking to Tucker Carlson a month ago, Tucker Carlson said to him, you know that Israelis are saying that God gave them the whole territory between the river Nile in Egypt and the river Euphrates in Iraq. And Mike Huckabee looked at him and said, of course, it's all theirs. They should take it. So this is the American ambassador, who's a Christian Zionist, who's saying to Israel, take the whole of West Asia, Arab West Asia, because it's yours, because God gave it to you. So Zionism is probably the only current settler colonial movement that uses the Bible as a land certificate owner, as a land ownership certificate. And now they are actually not just against Muslims in the West Bank and Gaza, but against Christians. I could send you any number of hundreds of links when children are attacking Christians in the streets of Tel Aviv, of Jerusalem, of Tiberias, everywhere, and even in the streets of Nazareth and Bethlehem, where Christianity has originated. So they now say we don't want Christians living in Palestine. And of course, this does not affect the Christian Zionists because their project is anyway anti-Semitic, because they think that all Jews should go to hell because they don't believe in Christ. So all this toxic and explosive mix has produced the most racist, the most militarized, the most industrialized genocidal nation on earth. Now, no nation that I know about is perfect. I'm sure you would agree with that. But we're not talking about perfection here. We're talking the opposite. We're talking about a nation which is based on robbing another nation. When Israelis say we have a right for self-determination, they mean our self-determination is the denial of self-determination to the Palestinians, now to the Lebanese, maybe to the Iranians, to the Iraqis, to the Egyptians, and to the Jordanians and Syrians, because all of those countries are now included in the map of Greater Israel. By the way, I forgot two countries. The map that people are now using is including the island of Cyprus and also a small part of Turkey. And now, after they will destroy Iran, because they are sure that they will destroy Iran, I'm not at all sure that Iran will be destroyed by Israel. I think the opposite is more likely. They are planning to attack three countries: Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. And in reserve, they want to attack Pakistan. They are working with the Baluchistan Freedom Party, which is a terrorist group against Pakistan. And Pakistan is a nuclear nation. So I want to end by saying a few words about the war against Iran. I don't have time to do anything else, but I want to speak about that because I share with this group an interest in Iran, of course. You all are connected to Iran culturally, historically, personally, by family, and so on. I think this attack on Iran is a terrible thing. It doesn't matter what your politics is. Really, it doesn't matter. Why am I saying this? You would know better than me that Iran did not attack other countries. Now, in 2003, the West has put together a coalition, which I think Japan was also the part of, to attack Iraq after 9/11. You would remember that they talked about weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. They knew they didn't exist, and yet they said they did exist, and they invented material that was totally lies, the dodgy dossier, if you remember, that they knew is a total lie because they wrote it themselves, and attacked Iraq. I was already in London by that time, and together with 2 million others, I went out to demonstrate against that war. I demonstrated, and we demonstrated, not because Iraq was such a great country. Iraq attacked Iran on behalf of the Americans for 8 years. 8 years in which 1 million people died in both countries as a result of that attack. And Iran had to defend itself. You may disagree with the government, but you can't disagree with the fact that it was attacked. It didn't attack Iraq. And Iraq also attacked Kuwait in the 90s, you would remember that, because the American ambassador, a woman called Gillespie, told Saddam that he can take Kuwait. And he did. And of course, then they went to war on him. After telling him to do it, they went to war on him. So Iraq was not a model country. It was a country that attacked its neighbors. And yet, many millions around the world went and demonstrated against the war because there was no reason. Iraq did nothing for 9/11. It wasn't involved in 9/11. If anyone was involved in 9/11, it was ISIS and Saudi Arabia. But they didn't attack Saudi Arabia. So the attack on Iran is an attack on a country that did not start wars against its neighbors. Not only that, Israel has been killing scientists and politicians and Iranian military figures for 30 or 40 years. Yeah. Sometimes they kill them in Tehran or other parts of Iran. Sometimes they kill them in Arab countries. Sometimes they even kill them in the Far East. Iran has never attacked Israel in response. I believe, and you may disagree with this, that Iran is one of the most peaceful, even now, one of the most peaceful countries in the long history of almost 5,000 years. Of course, it was an empire. Of course, it attacked many other empires like the Greek and so on. But if you look at the history of Iran as a country, it is one of the most important cultures. And I don't think I need to persuade Iranians of this, yeah? Important culture in terms of literature, poetry, visual arts, the Iranian culture, and I love Persian cooking. I'm sure you all do. Whatever part of Iranian architecture, art, the amazing art tradition of Iran. Look at what the Israelis destroyed in the Golistan, the palace. These are amazing gifts to humanity that the Iranian people or the Persian people have been creating for thousands of years. You can't say this about the Americans. You can't say this about many other countries, of course, Israel. And basically, the attack on Iran is because it is a very developed country. Scientifically, it is very advanced. It's very advanced in many ways, industrially, because of the sanctions that Iran had to live under. And I'm not just talking about 1980. Iran was a peaceful country that wanted to control its oil reserves and had the right to do so. And in 1953, the first American coup was carried together with the British against Iran, as you know. Yeah, and the Mossadegh that was elected. Mossadegh was not a communist. Yeah, Mossadegh was a nationalist. He was removed, and the Shah was brought in to represent the Western influence. So we have seen almost 80 years of toxic influence of the West over Iran and the life of Iranians. The sanctions operating from 1980 are crippling sanctions. If the sanctions weren't there, I think Iran would be more democratic. I think it would be a richer country. It would be a stronger country, and it would be able to contribute to world peace and culture. What the West has done, and especially Israel and the US, not just now, but for all these decades, is made Iran live in fear, and Iran had to defend itself. So now we have a situation where Iran decided, because of the fatwa, not to develop the nuclear bomb. And who is actually talking about the Iranian nuclear bomb, if not Israel, that has between 300 and 400 nuclear bombs, which are actually illegal and illicit, because there is no atomic energy institute control of the Israeli bombs, while Iran has allowed the weapons inspectors in, as you know, and signed an agreement to avoid nuclear fission and nuclear bombs. The result of this war, this attack, the latest attack on Iran, will probably persuade the current leadership to build a nuclear bomb. Is this good? I don't think so. I don't think we want nuclear bombs anywhere. And the first place we don't want them is in Israel. But what we now have brought about is a situation where they are likely to develop nuclear bomb. I think the Iranian people probably wouldn't like it, but I understand from a number of my Iranian friends who are living in Iran that more and more people in Iran think that that's the only thing to do, because if they had a nuclear bomb like North Korea, they wouldn't be under this terrible attack. And they wouldn't be under attack in June 2025 either. So I want to end by saying Israel, my new book, which will be out in a few months, is called Israel, the Chaos Engine of the West. And that is my thesis. Israel is the chaos engine of the West. It is both serving the West and using it. Israel is not the tail of the dog anymore. It's the only country whose leader can come to Washington anytime he wants and speak to the Congress for 50 standing ovations last time. He is the only person who the Americans allow to attack their president. You remember how Netanyahu came to the Congress and attacked Obama for signing the agreement with Iran. The agreement with Iran was a very good agreement. It meant that Iran stopped developing a nuclear bomb. It never did, actually, all the necessary parts of the process. People, experts came in on a constant basis to make sure that this is happening. And if Trump wouldn't pull that agreement and annul it, we probably would have a very different society in Iran and around Iran right now. And I want to end by saying this. What is Israel using against Iran? It's using the richness of the society of Iran. Iran took many, many people from who suffered the wars around it. For example, from Afghanistan. You know that. People from Azerbaijan are there. People from Syria. People from Kurdistan. Iran is a patchwork of minorities. Actually, it has a Jewish minority as well. And they don't leave Iran. They live there. They love it. So I think what Israel is using against Iran is the fact that Iran is a country made of many nationalities, many religions, many beliefs, many approaches, and those people on the whole live in peace. For example, more in peace than in China, more in peace than the West, more in peace than in Russia, and so on. Muslims in China are suffering, as you know. So the fact that people live in Iran and don't have to fear if they're Jewish or if they're Christian or if they're Assyrian and so on, if they're this is the weakness of Iran. This is what Israel and the United States have used to take people from those minority groups and to recruit them for the project of regime change. And the people that should do regime change are only the Iranian people, the people living in Iran. This has nothing to do with the Americans, nothing to do with the British, nothing to do with the Israelis. And Iran, the people of Iran should decide who should rule them. I think that's a very simple principle that everyone applies in their own country. They should also allow Iran to apply it. And I think then we will have a more democratic situation, a more democratic society in Iran. I'm totally opposed to this war because this war helps no one in Iran. It has not brought down the government. It has destroyed Tehran, one of the most important cities in Asia, a modern city. It has destroyed all cities. The attack on Isfahan, on other centers of culture, thousands of years of culture are now destroyed by those barbarians in Israel and the US. I think I've taken enough time, and I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Professor Zabner. So you can take a break. We have a few announcements to do that, so you can turn off your video if you want and take a water break or tea, whatever. And
Sure.
a few announcements in Farsi, and then we're going to come back to you to answer the question. Thank you very much. اوکی، اعلامیه بیانیه حقوق بشر کانون رو فیروزه جان، من شما رو آنمیوت میکنم. بفرمایید.
به انگلیسی هستش این بیانیه، به خاطر که سخنران به انگلیسی حرف می‌زدن، بیانیه هم به انگلیسی هستش. Dear friends, with the escalation of the military confrontations and the expansion of wartime conditions in Iran, concerns about the safety and lives of prisoners across the country's prisons have significantly increased. Prisoners that were already struggling with severe overcrowding, limited medical facilities, and restricted communication between prisoners and their families and lawyers are now facing circumstances in which the risks associated with the war may dramatically intensify the vulnerability of detainees. According to information received by Harana, problems such as food shortages, declining quality of health and medical services, limited access to drinking water and hot water for showers and severe overcrowding are widespread in prisons across the country. Reports from Iran Human Rights Monitor indicates that at present, prisoners in Iran face two simultaneous threats. On the one hand are the direct or indirect consequences of military operations and the proximity of some prisons to sensitive facilities. On the other hand are the policies and actions of the ruling regime in Iran, including restrictions on prisoners' contacts with their families, disruptions in access to food and medical services, locked prison wards, and forced transfers between detention facilities. This situation is particularly alarming for political and ideological prisoners, death row inmates and imprisoned women, children held with their mothers, and prisoners suffering from illnesses. These groups face compounded risks to the right to life, health, and human dignity during wartime conditions. Reports received by the Campaign to Free Political Prisoners in Iran, the abbreviated name is CFPPI, indicate the prisoners are being transferred to undisclosed locations, including sites controlled by the IRGC, short for Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corporation. At the same time, many detainees are reportedly being left without adequate food, medication, or protection as the fighting intensifies. CFPPI calls on government, the European Union, and the United Nations to take urgent action to protect prisoners and demand their immediate and unconditional release. According to Helena May Sato's latest report, May Sato is the United Nations person who takes care of human rights issues for Iran. Presented today, Monday, March 16, at the 61st session of the United Nations Human Rights Council reviews the human rights situation in Iran between January 2025 and February 2026. However, its main focus is the nationwide protests that began in December 28th of 2025. Ms. Sato's in her latest report to the Human Rights Council has highlighted the violent suppression of nationwide protests in January, widespread internet and communications shutdown, and the worsening of human rights crisis in Iran following military attacks by Israel and the United States. She emphasized that the use of lethal force against protesters, concealing the scale of the crackdown throughout the communications blackout, and the use of charges carrying the death penalties to silent dissent have been the key elements of these crises. Yes to life, no to execution. Thank you for your attention.
مرسی فیروزه جان، تشکر. من یه برنامه دیگر رو با شما شیر میکنم. دوستان هیئت مدیره از من خواستن که این برنامه رو بگم. برنامه نوروزی کانون هستش و صحبت نوروز، همدردی و همبستگی. کانون دوستداران فرهنگ ایران در این گرد همایی ضمن چیدن سفره 7 سین و یادبود جانباختگان راه آزادی، مراسم شمارش تحویل سال شروع میشه در ساعت 10:45 صبح. بعد پذیرایی و جمعه 20 مارس از 9:30 تا 1 بعد از ظهر آدرسش در اینجا نوشته شده و اعلامیه هاش فرستاده شده و خواستن که دوستانی که میخوان شرکت کنن تا سه‌شنبه 17 مارچ این به اصطلاح اعلام کنن که دوستان بدونن که چه باید بکنن برای این وزیر. بسیار عالی. من استاپ شیرینگ میکنم و برمیگردیم به زوم. Okay. We have a few questions. Okay, let me make you the spotlight. Okay. So we start from Farid Marjai. Please unmute yourself, Farid, and ask your question or comment.
Hello, good evening. Does the voice come across okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. I would like to thank Professor Bresheeth for his valuable lecture. I have heard him before, and one of the interesting points he made in the internet, I've come across it, is in terms of solution, he recalled early 20th century or 19th century, as a future plan, as a template for future plan, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews can live together for centuries. I think this utterance has been very helpful, and it provides almost a model, a hopeful model for the future in the area, Palestine and so forth. I would like to thank him for his lecture and his commitment to the work he's doing. Two questions. One, that he mentioned, of course, we knew that in the news in the past 2 years, that more than 90% of the population in Israel supports the war crimes in Gaza. So how is that? One gets curious. How does this political culture, this psychology comes across? Is it a bunker mentality? Is it the system breeds such a thing? Or is it the Holocaust victimhood channeled in that direction? How's that? The second question is, as he explained not the details, but aspects of the genocide in the past 2 years, European countries, particularly Germany, were directly or indirectly supporting that or silent. How is that? That was kind of shocking. And the last point is, because of his humanist and realistic and rational stance on Israel and Palestine, does he get any hostile feedback from pro-Israel elements? Thank you for your time.
Interesting and complex questions. First, before I answer, I want to say that what I related to when I talked about the system that allowed Muslims, Jews, and Christians to live together for many centuries is the period which is normally referred to as the convivencia period by historians. Historians that are writing on the Muslim control of Spain, what the Muslims called Al-Andalus. Now, Al-Andalus existed between the year 711 in the Christian calendar when Muslims conquered most of Spain, and the year 1492, when America was discovered, yeah, but also when the Jews and Muslims were finally ejected, expelled from Spain by what is the Catholic king and queen, Ferdinand and Isabella. Now, this is a period of roughly 800 years, 8 centuries, my friends, 8 centuries of life together, with ups and downs, with better times and worse times, but on the whole, without Holocaust, without pogroms, without anti-Semitism, without Islamophobia, without hatred that lasted. So this is a period which is almost harmonious, but more importantly, the life together on its own is what it produced. And what it produced is immense, is amazing, is the seed of the Renaissance, without which the Renaissance could never have happened. What we see in Al-Andalus, because the 3 religions live together, and live together in relative harmony, is first of all the creation of what we call Spanish today, okay? This language is the creation of 800 years of life together. It's not done by the Christians, it's done by the people of Andalusia. So what we call today, either Spanish or other names, this is a creation of that society, of that togetherness. So this is one creation which is very important and of course very beautiful, very complex creation, combining Arabic words, Hebrew words, and Latin words and Latin structure, and creating a new language to the new community. This is a symbol of the life together. This language is a symbol of the life together. What did it also create? It created amazing developments in mathematics, in algebra, in geometry, in geography, the best maps, without which, Columbus would probably never find anything, were created by the Muslim map makers. They invented the sextant and many other instruments, scientific instruments that allowed the navigators to return home, for example, without which they could never return to Spain. They allowed great inventions in the area of timekeeping. They allowed great developments in the area of translation. In Al-Andalus, everything was translated into everything. Yeah, all the languages of Europe. For example, the Bible was translated. The works of the philosophers of Greece and Rome that were abandoned by Christianity because they were not Christian were translated and retranslated into Arabic, and from Arabic back into ancient Greece, Greek, and so on. The work of the dramaturgs in the theater. Al-Andalus is an amazing example of art, of visual art, of poetry. You would know a lot of this from your own Persian background. because a lot of it was shared with, at the same time that these things happen in Iran, they also happened in Al-Andalus. So I don't have time to talk about this, but I just want to say 800 years of life together is not a minute, is not an hour, is not a year, and is not even a century. We're talking about 8 centuries. This is historical time. And we have that, and we can go back to it as a basis of life together in the Middle East. And we want to do that. And we have an organization called Convivencia that works for one state in Palestine, liberating the Palestinians and allowing those Jews that accept freedom and equal rights for the Palestinians to live there in peace and in justice. So the future can be helped by the past, because as opposed to the life that was very difficult for Jews in Europe and ended up in the Holocaust, and started with a lot of hatred, but then ended up with genocide. There was no genocide of Jews in the Arab world. And this is not just Al-Andalus I'm talking about, but North Africa, the Middle East, Arabia, and of course Iran. Iran was part of life together and still is today part of life together. Now to the 2 questions that you asked me. They are very difficult questions. I'm sure you know that. They are very difficult to answer because they're so counterintuitive. Why would 97% of the Israeli Jewish population support a genocide? Why would any population support a genocide? And genocide is actually not normative, it's unusual. It is the exception. Population might not be working together very well, but they don't kill each other normally. The answer is, I'll try to give you a very short answer, but the answer is complex. As a child, I grew up in Israel, and I had religious and non-religious education at different parts of my schooling. And so I know that education to racism starts in the kindergarten. For example, in the kindergarten, we had different kindergartens for Arabs and Jews. All of a sudden, I grew up with Arab children, families that stayed in Jaffa. About 95% of the Palestinians of Jaffa were rejected, were expelled forcibly by the force of arms. But 5% or so managed to stay. Those were supposedly full citizens of Israel. This was never the case. There was never equality with Jews allowed them. So first of all, there was no school for most people in Israel that would accept Arabs and Jews. There were only 2 places, Haifa and Jaffa. Why? Because there was a regulation at the time, which was very progressive, that if Arabs make up more than a percentage, I don't remember what the percent was, 10 or 15 or 20% of the population in a local authority, then they study together in the same school, and they study both Hebrew and Arabic. This was the regulation. And the only schools that met that regulation were in those 2 towns, because these were Palestinian towns, Haifa and Jaffa, both of them on the coast, both of them port cities, very modern, very vibrant cities, very beautiful. And in those 2 cities, and I lived in one of them in Jaffa, the people were educated together. That was excellent, but it didn't last. After, I don't remember if it was 3 or 4 years, the legislation was changed, and then it was total separation. Now, immediately at the level of the kindergarten, the inequality started. Until today, the Arab-Palestinian student gets less than half of what the Israeli Jewish students get. Okay, so the investment in Palestinian citizens in education and in other areas, in health, for example, yeah, most doctors in Israel are Palestinian. Did you know that? Most nurses are Palestinian. They actually offer the service to the population. But the service in the Arab cities and in the Arab villages is miserable. Is 19th century. The service offered to Israeli Jews by Palestinian doctors mainly is excellent. So actually what the Palestinians are doing are offering services to the Jewish society, but they're not offering and not allowed to offer the same level of service to Palestinians. So from the age of 3 or 4, you realize that Palestinians are not full citizens. They never were. Now, of course, the Professor Nurit Elchanan Peled, a very good friend of mine, has written a book about Israeli school books, and showed without any exceptions how racist Israeli school books are. So this is part of the answer to your question. What happens is that from the kindergarten to the first class, to the last class, to the university, what is offered is a racist apartheid education. You can only call it that. And Arabs are not supposed to be proper human beings with proper rights like everybody else. So the Arab villages and towns, for example, are not accepting when somebody's family grows, they have new children and so on, and they want to build another flat or another house, they won't get the permit because they're Palestinian. It's not written in the law. It's just the practice is racist. So they build illegally. And then, you've probably seen this on television many times, Israel is destroying their property. By the way, when Israel is destroying the house, you have to pay for the destruction of it. If you own a house which was built without permission, and they don't give permission, so you can only build without permission, you have to pay an enormous sum, which they say is the cost of destruction. If you don't pay that, you go to jail. So on every street corner, it's clear that Arabs are not equal, shouldn't be, and they actually shouldn't be there. And you hear this as a child, but then you hear it as an adult. Every minister in this government is saying day and night that Arabs should not be in Israel. They call it Israel, or Eretz Israel in Hebrew, the land of Israel. And they say they have no rights. And actually, they're right. Netanyahu changed the constitution so that Israel is the state of the Jewish people. Not just the Jewish people living in Israel, you understand, but the Jewish people around the world. But it's not the state of Palestinians. it's not their state at all. It doesn't have to represent them. It doesn't have to give them rights because they don't belong there. So what you have is a system of apartheid, which is worse than South African apartheid. And when people are from the kindergarten and the school and then the army, which is basically an important institution of racism, because you are learning to kill people that have no arms at all. I mean, Palestinians are killed every day in the West Bank when there is no Hamas and no arms, and they are killed. Their olive trees are uprooted and burnt. The land is taken. Their houses are destroyed. All this is illegal, even according to the law in Israel. But the police is not going to inquire. No one that kills the Palestinians is going to jail or have a court case against them. This is not happening. You know where this was the case? In Nazi Germany. Only in Nazi Germany. So we are now Jewish Nazis. That's how we run our society. And one of the most famous philosophers and scientists in Israel, Professor Leibovich, who is dead now, he died in the 80s, gave it a name. He said that Israelis have become Judeo-Nazis. Is there something more disgusting than being a Judeo-Nazi? There is no way of justifying this. And the second question...
Professor, there are many people raise their hands, so if you please briefly answer questions, then we can allow people also ask questions.
You'll have to ask me simpler questions, though. But yeah, I'll be very brief about this. The European powers have exported the Jewish problem to Palestine. Instead of allowing Jews to live in Europe in the 1940s, they killed them. And many Europeans who were not Germans partook in this, participated in this, and agreed with it. Not just the Germans are to blame. Many actually were complicit. Though they were not Nazis and they were not German, they were complicit in the Holocaust. For example, in France, in Italy, in Holland, etc. So these societies were anti-Semitic. And now they support Israel as a way of making amends. But they support Israel in its crime. They support Israel in its racism and its apartheid. And I think that's, we want some more questions. So let's go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Ektesabi, please go ahead. I ask you to unmute yourself and start.
Thank you very much for your talk and for your clear and principled stance against genocide. I deeply admire that you have made the study and remembrance of the genocide against the Jews and as a central mission of your life. Your current research and in-depth investigation into the situation in Palestine are also equally or even more important. As you know, and in several occasions, you kindly helped us. Over the past 3 decades, my laboratory and institute have been deeply involved in efforts to protect cultural heritage and important artworks from the threats of war, poverty, and ignorance. Through this work, we have developed a clear philosophy. The destruction of cultural heritage, which we see as the erasure of humanity's collective memory, is not merely an attack on objects or monuments. In our view, the erasure of collective memory and identity can be even more devastating than the physical destruction of human life. For this reason, it's deeply painful for me to see news reports that museums and heritage sites are being systematically destroyed in Gaza, Syria, Iraq, as well as in Iran. Isfahan, Shiraz, and numerous other cities and countries that have been suffered devastating bombardments. These sites are the cradle of human civilization and testament to the birth of culture itself. The targeting of Iranian heritage, in particular, that is going on today at this moment, strikes at the very root of our shared human story, aiming to derail the recognition of diversity and the plurality of cultural identity that define our common humanity. Our work and this perspective have been very well received by diverse communities in Japan, among the people, government circles, academics, and mass media, and in more than 10 countries around the world with whom we have worked directly and continue to engage closely. I hope that you might be able to help us develop a conceptual framework. I emphasize a conceptual framework that explains how the erasure of historical memory and the cultural identity of people and nations could be understood as part of a broader concept of genocide. Expanding the understanding of genocide to include the erasure of a nation's collective memory. So these days I cannot really talk, so I have to make some memos to be able to concentrate. Thank you very much.
I don't think I have the time to fully relate to what you're saying, Ali, but it is incredibly important what you said. And as we have worked together for a number of years on cultural heritage in different countries, I'm well aware of your lifelong commitment to this important work, and I greatly appreciate it, as you know, and was a beneficiary of your generosity. I just want to say that in terms of Gaza itself, this is terrifying. This is really terrifying. Not just in Gaza, of course, but in Syria, for example. Some of the oldest mosques and some of the oldest churches in Christianity were actually not in Palestine, but in Syria and in Gaza. So actually what Israel has done systematically, like killing all the doctors that they could, all the university lecturers that they could, all the ambulance crews that they could, all the journalists that they could. They also removed evidence to any ancient society in Gaza. Now, Gaza is one of the oldest cities of humanity. It is mentioned in the earliest part of the Bible. And the Bible is modern in comparison to Gaza. Gaza is mentioned in the earliest texts of the Egyptian and Babylonian written evidence about the population of Palestine. Gaza, Jaffa, and Jericho much older than Jerusalem or other countries or other parts of Palestine. So Israel has removed any evidence that anything existed before the 20th century in Gaza. And actually what was built in the 20th century is also destroyed. So there is no way of getting this back. We've lost it forever. When they destroyed the great mosque in Damascus, that's it. It will never be rebuilt like it was. Imagine somebody destroying St. Paul's in Rome, which is much more modern than what we're talking about in Gaza. It cannot be rebuilt. And they made sure that not a single stone remained whole in those places. This is inhuman, and very truly you have touched a very important principle. This is part of genocide. Destroying the culture of people is part of destroying the people. And I would be very interested in working together internationally on updating the thinking on Palestine by including this in the definitions of the crime of genocide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zabner. Bahram, please unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Bresheeth, for your comprehensive talk on Palestine. Very appreciated. And also I would like to thank Dr. Ektesabi, who invited you, introduced you to Kanu. I echo your sentiment about these so-called Arab monarchies of the region, the Persian Gulf region, that they actually are co-responsible for the genocide. And if you recall, at the General Assembly at the UN, when most delegates left, when Netanyahu wanted to speak, the few stayed, and including UAE. UAE delegates stayed when Netanyahu was speaking. But I have a question also about the narrative of Holocaust, that it is said that it was mainly constructed after the Six-Day War, 1967. I heard it from Chomsky and some others, and Norman Finkelstein has a book, The Holocaust Industry, that is saying that they use this Holocaust narrative to whitewash the crimes of Israel and make a support for what Israel is doing. What your opinion on that? Thank you.
Again, very briefly, as I said before, my parents were survivors of the Holocaust, and they were part of almost 250,000 survivors that ended up in Israel, for the simple reason that the countries of Europe were very good at killing Jews, but very bad at giving them a place to live after the war. So they ended up in Israel. My parents, for example, were not Zionists. My uncle was anti-Zionist. One of the first things that Israel did under David Ben-Gurion, the prime minister, the first prime minister of Israel, and the main figure in Zionism before Israel, is they more or less banned cultural production in Yiddish. Yiddish was the language of the people who were destroyed in Europe, the European Jews. They, in the main, about 98% of them spoke Yiddish. That was the language, that was the culture, that was the language of the theater, of the cinema, of the literature, of the poetry, and of their daily life. Hebrew was a liturgical language, like Latin, for example. Yeah, people don't talk in Latin to each other, and people didn't talk Hebrew to each other. They just used it in the synagogue because the sacred texts are in Hebrew, also in Aramaic, but Aramaic is not a language used anymore. So neither Aramaic that, of course, Jesus used, or Hebrew were not used for the 2,000 years the Jews lived out of Palestine. They spoke Arabic in Al-Andalus. In Al-Andalus, by the way, they spoke also Hebrew. And they spoke Yiddish. Yiddish was the language of most Jews for most of this time. When Ben-Gurion became prime minister in 1948, when the state was proclaimed, he came up with limiting regulations on the use of Yiddish. For example, it was illegal to produce a play in Yiddish or to make a film in Yiddish. This meant that, my parents, whose culture was Yiddish, whose love to literature or to actually read the daily newspaper in Yiddish was a great pleasure for them. It was the only thing that was left from the old 2,000 years of Jews in Europe. That is all that was left. And that he's taken away from them. For example, if you wanted to print a book in Yiddish, you had to pay 100% tax on the paper. If you wanted to print a newspaper in Yiddish, you had to pay 100% tax on the paper. No other language, including Arabic, actually attracted taxes at all. Paper was not taxed, but the paper for Yiddish was taxed. So I'm telling you this, one of my first memories is going to an illegal play in Yiddish that was attacked by the police, and we ended up all running away from the police. I was 4 years old. It's a very interesting memory that I cherish. So there is, a narrative that was created, I think, not after 1967, to be accurate, but after 1961, because in 1961, there was the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, and then the narrative was invented and expanded. Yeah. Before that, there was no interest either in the Holocaust or in the survivors of the Holocaust. The survivors of the Holocaust were referred to as lambs to the slaughter. This is the phrase that was used all the time by Israeli politicians about people like my parents. Instead of fighting the Nazis, they went like lambs to the slaughter. Now, not only is this an accusation which is very undermining the Jews that died in the Holocaust, it's also not true. When historians checked what was the rate of resistance to Nazism of different groups in Europe, the rate in France was 1.25% of the population. The rate in Italy was lower. The rate in Holland was lower. The rate in Poland, for example, was higher. But the rate of Jews fighting against the Nazis, despite the fact that they had no state and no arms, was the highest in Europe. It was near 10% of Jews, including in my own family. 2 of my uncles died as partisans fighting the Nazis. So that history was reversed. That history was denied. That history was shamed out of existence by a state calling itself a Jewish state. Jews fought the Nazis with arms. And then we were told that that never happened and that they were lambs to the slaughter. I think this is an example of manufacturing a Holocaust culture that is the opposite of what existed, okay? Now, the other thing, of course, was there was a lot of money in the Holocaust. The only people that were financially paid for their suffering in the Holocaust were the Jewish state. And the state took the money on behalf of people like my parents, but paid them less than 5% of what it got. So most of the money, and we're talking about many billions of pounds every year, for it hasn't actually finished. It's still continuing in different ways. Most of it went to projects like the Israeli atomic bombs. Okay? It went for projects like electrifying Israel or buying arms. Most of the money for buying arms came from that. And the actual people that had very little, my parents had nothing left. They couldn't go to a home because it was given away. They didn't have anything left. They didn't have any photograph from the past. They didn't have letters. They only had what they wore on their back when they left the camps. Coming to Israel, they got very, very minimal help. Actually, most of the time, nothing at all. And then they took the language from them. They took the culture from them. So Zionism not only attacked Palestinians, not only attacked Arab around Israel, it attacked the victims of the Holocaust, but took the money in their name. So this is like a double insult. Israel created a myth, created a whole literature, research, and so on. Yad Vashem, the Museum of the Holocaust. But this was not to support the people who survived or to honor the dead. It was actually to support Zionism in its wars. I think there are other questions, so I need to cut off here on this. But it's a very important question.
Thank you very much. Said, please unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haim. I couldn't agree more with what you say. Let me, I have a few questions, and maybe not related to specifically to the question of genocide, which I totally agree. And as a student of history, as a lay person, student history, I have committed myself to learn more about this study of Judaism and Israeli and the progress of Israeli society and the impact of that in United States. Of course, I've been living here for the last 55 years, so I'm quite familiar with the policy of the U.S. government towards the question of Israel and whatever is related to that. Right now, I'm sure as a scholar of this issue, you know that the sentiment in the United States is changing. You have a lot of new voices here that are protesting or are just showing sentiment that the Israeli government has a lot of control over the foreign policy of the United States. And I'm sure you know about that coalition, that part of the MAGA movement that are not in tune with the end timers. My question to is, when you look at this process, and of course you live in Europe and you know the history of how European try to set aside the question of Zionism by labeling anybody who thought about or talked about the, the atrocities and the injustices that the Israeli government does in terms of anti-Semitism. Now, my question to you is, how do you are you processing this change that is happening in the United States, and what are my sense of the Israeli society before the recent wars and the question of Palestine was, when I remember the era of Golda Meir and the early Israelis, they were so progressive and they had a different way of looking at the issues. But now it has totally changed nowadays. It's now, aside from the biblical idea that a lot of people have in Israel, Israel is becoming a very, a state that with the new technology is doing not only a better vision of the future, but actually helping the whole idea that we have to lose our ideal about liberalism, our idea about democracy, and just try to focus on the issue of the heritage. I wanted to know how you are looking at this issue right now. Thank you for your talk too.
Thank you for a very good question, which is very important, not just in terms of our discussion, but in terms of understanding what is happening today in the United States. Now, the United States is the main supporter and has been for over 60 years, the main supporter of Israel in arms, in money. The genocide already cost more than 45 billion pounds. I said that to destroy Hiroshima and Nagasaki cost 2 billion. I'm talking about dollars, not pounds. Sorry. Being British, I keep confusing them. So Israel received something already like $48 billion in the 2 years of the genocide. This is an enormous sum of money, which is more than the rest of the world put together has got from the United States. And this time they got it not just for arms, but for actual genocide. And of course, this continues. So this is not a sentiment that most Americans share. Americans now are in a process of decline. The American empire is declining very fast, I would say. You live in Japan, most of you, but your question comes from the United States. And you know that if you go to, say, an airport in the United States and you go to an airport in China or in Japan or anywhere in East Asia, this is a very different experience. Or go into a train in China and a train in America. The American system is creaking, is old technology. There is no investment in serving the citizen in America in the way that there is in Japan or China or many other countries. Yeah. So actually, President Trump was the first one to say this in his first presidency. He said, why are we, suffering from very bad amenities in all areas of life in the United States? He has spoken about it, but he has done nothing to resolve it. So this decline of the American empire is in all areas apart from weapons. But actually, the American weapons are amazingly not as advanced as some of the weapons of Iran. Please consider this. This is an incredible fact that some of the missiles that Iran has developed, like Khorram Shah or the Shahed drone or all kinds of things that Iran has developed, because he didn't have a chance of buying those things. He didn't have the money to buy them. They're very expensive. The Iranians have developed it to a higher level than the United States. I think this is amazing. This tells you how deep is the decline of the state and society is in the United States. So what we see is a lot of the population of the United States, I think between 60 and 70%, is against the war. Despite all the propaganda, despite all the brutality of the propaganda, despite the Islamophobic nature of the propaganda against the Iranian regime, most Americans are not stupid. They know that this is not going to help them. Many of them also understand that it's not going to help the Iranians either. This is not going to help anybody apart from Netanyahu. This is not going to help the people of Israel that are now getting Iranian missiles on their heads. And they're suffering. And so they should, because they started this war. So we have here a historical process of the West declining. This is true also about Europe. And that decline is the result of American policies. For example, the policy of getting Ukraine into NATO and getting all the East European countries on America's side against Russia. Totally unnecessary conflict. Totally brutal conflict. Ukraine is destroyed as a country. It will take many decades and money that doesn't exist to rebuild it, like in Gaza. What is this in the aid of? Who is supposed to get anything out of it apart from people who produced American arms? The American people are paying taxes to destroy Ukraine and Russia. They are not going to benefit in any way from this. They are not going to build their airports or their roads or their railways in the way that China did. No, they are just going to pay for developing arms to kill people. So, in a sense, what we see in America is a number of processes. One of them is the decline. Another one is, despite the fact that the Israeli lobby is the most powerful lobby in the world, no one believes it anymore. Americans don't believe it. If they believed it, they would support these wars in a great majority. They don't believe it. The only people who believe it are in the White House and the people around Trump. Trump himself is not fully a person, I think. I don't think he understands most of the things that he's talking about. He says what the last person told him. And he's kept away from information. He's telling us now for 2.5 weeks, we've destroyed everything in Iran. They have got nothing. And actually, Iran with nothing is still attacking in Arabia, still attacking Israel, still attacking the Americans. Their army bases are empty. Why is that? Because America lives on killing. That's what they make their money from. Destruction, death and destruction, killing and chaos is the main American business. When they need, for example, to make a telephone, to make, why are there not American cameras, for example? Why are all cameras coming from Japan and China and Vietnam? The American industry cannot produce a Sony or a Canon or a Fuji. Why? Because they don't specialize in this. Computers are the only example, but they can't actually produce the computers in America. They produce them in China, now in other countries as well. So actually, there are great brains in America, and yet they need the other parts of the world to do the production for them. They have destroyed the basis in America. They can't produce a train that goes half the speed of the trains of China or Japan. What is this? Yeah. So this is a decline. And the other thing is the decline of democracy in the United States. The United States is not a democratic country for a very long time. But now it doesn't even have a pretense of democracy. Trump had to get Congress to agree to a war. He didn't go to Congress. He started a war. He started one in June against Iran, and now a new one. He doesn't even talk to Congress about it. There's not a pretense of being democratic. He's actually now talking about he doesn't need an election in 2 years' time because he can continue as president. He will be an emperor, an emperor for life. That's what he thinks he can achieve. Maybe he can achieve it. He doesn't believe in laws. He likes Greenland. He'll take it. He likes Canada. He'll take it. He wants the Panama Canal. He will take it. He wanted the oil of Venezuela. He came there, arrested the president, and now Venezuela is doing what he's saying. He's the real president of Venezuela. So this behavior is actually a sign of decline. It's not a sign of strength. Yes, they can do it. Not for a long time, though. And where they cannot do it is, for example, in Iran. They wanted a regime change. They haven't managed to get it because they didn't know what they want. They went to the war because of Netanyahu, not because it serves their interest. In what way does a regime change serve the interests of the housewife in Chicago or the academic in New York or the computer engineer in California? In what way? It's total nonsense. So I think what we see is a weakening of the American very interesting political system, a system that historically was important, and now it doesn't exist. It is not a real political system. It's a system of billionaires paying so that their views would be followed by the regime in the White House. So I think a regime like this is suffering a crisis. You pointed out accurately that there is a change. The changes, yes, they can attack Iran. Yes, they can attack Venezuela. Yes, they can take Greenland, but they can't get the population fooled into supporting wars because the population know that the war in Ukraine didn't support them. And it didn't support the people of Ukraine, more importantly. And the population of Iran is not going to be helped by this destruction. But also, the population of Israel is not going to be helped by it. And the population of the United States will just pay for the destruction. You wouldn't get anything out of it, but they will have to pay taxes for this war for many, maybe centuries. Their national debt is huge. So that's my answer. You know, I think I can't make it any shorter, but I don't want to take more time. It's a very good question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zabner. Ms. Shahbazaz, please unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor Bresheeth. It was very informative and amazing lecture. I learned a lot. I have two questions. One of them, one of our friend asked about, is about people of Israel. How come, what the hate they have to vote for 98%, about 98% voting about genocide.
Sorry, people from what? You said the people of, and I didn't hear the other word.
People from Israel.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Voting for
yeah.
And I understand education, culturally feeding them, social status, economical status. But Israel supposedly was a democratic country, and they should be well informed, supposedly. And don't they question these systems? Other nations do, like we, Iranian do, American do. Is it possible that, because I'm not sure if I'm using the right terminology, because maybe they are kind of unorganic nation, the country, the nation was not naturally founded. It was created by some countries. This is my first question. My second question is, as you mentioned, genocide and then orbicide, ejuside, which medicide, that they were very new to me. What is, right now, Gaza is in very bad situation. What is this extreme mainstream media silence? What is this silence that no one is talking about it?
Okay. Just let me take notes. Right. The first, I did start answering it, and there are many other reasons that I can't go in a very short time about this uniformity of the Israeli support for a genocidal system. You're right to ask and to wonder how come that a country that said it is democracy is, in a sense, voting for genocide. You're totally right to ask that question. But Israel was never a democracy. I told you about the first year of the state where I was a child and realized even as a child that Arabs are not equal people to us. The reason why I am today, and for the last 55 years or so, supporting the Palestinian rights, is because as a child, I believed that they were like me. Yeah? They were humans like me. They were people that cared about the same things and wanted the same things. I saw that as a child, so every grown-up should be able to see it, you know. If it was clear to me when I was very young, why did the grown-ups not see it? And, you know, the people in Germany during Hitler's time were not questioning, on the whole, were not questioning the policies of the Nazi Party. So there is a similarity between the two societies. The two societies, the Nazi society, the Third Reich, and, you know, in Israel, the opponents of Netanyahu and the regime are calling it a Fourth Reich. They are using that name because it explains to them why people are so pliable, so lacking in opposition to apartheid, to genocide, to ethnic cleansing, to stealing the land, to destroying the people in Palestine. It's true. There is no opposition worth the name against all these illegal moves. Because like in Nazi Germany, this is a society which doesn't even make an effort to look like a democracy. This is from the beginning not a democracy. A democracy cannot say that the law applies only to some people but not to other people. That's what Hitler did. He took the Jews out of civil rights. He totally cancelled their civil rights. So anyone could kill them, but not be punished because it wasn't punishable. In every Israeli can kill a Palestinian, nothing will happen to them. So this is a Nazi state. And in a Nazi state, you don't oppose the regime. And it wasn't fully Nazi until the last few years, but it was on the way there since 1948. It's a process of perfecting the form of fascism that now rules Israel. We historians could see it before it was fully functional because we can compare to other situations. We compared it to Nazi Germany and we said, this is where it's going. But most people didn't see it. Most people in Germany didn't see where Hitler is taking them until they were there and they didn't know how to get there. Historians, their responsibility is to point out to societies what they're doing. And I think that's what we are doing also. Palestinians and Israeli historians who are anti-Zionist are describing the process of Nazification that happened to Israel. And very briefly also, one of the important things that happened in Israel also happened in Iran, and that is the use of the religion to enslave people, okay, to enslave the population, and both regimes use. One is using the Shia Muslim religion, and the other one uses a version of Judaism, which is a very racist Judaism, to enslave the population, to enslave it in the way that they are unable to criticize, they are unable to oppose, they are unable to say this is not democratic because they themselves are not democratic and they are not looking for democracy. They call themselves a democracy, but they know the truth. Every Israeli knows and accepts that Palestinians are not equal. So what kind of democracy is that? So this is the first answer. The second answer about media silence, well, this is very complicated. the media in the West is privatized. I think as it is in Japan as well. So privatized media does what the owner wants. Yeah. An example, Ellison, one of the richest people on earth, has put his candidates in different companies, media companies. Barry Weiss is now running his media empire, and she knows about media like I know about the moon. But she has views. She's a Zionist, and she silences the whole system that she is now the queen of. So you cannot criticize Israel, and you cannot criticize Trump doing what Israel wants. Trump came to power as the figure of MAGA. But this is not MAGA, this is MIGA. Make Israel great again. It's not make America great again. America is not great and is not going to be under Trump or any other president like that. Israel is controlling, before it was possible to do what they're doing now, attacking Iran together with the US, they didn't just occupy the Palestinian land, they occupied the minds. They occupied the minds of Israelis, like Hitler occupied the minds of Germans. This is the same process. Propaganda, lies, inventions, mythology, which is racist. In both cases, racism is the main tool to silence people and to make them pliable so that they do what the regime wants. So Israel and Iran are very similar in the way that they use religion. The religion is not used always to help religious ends. It's used as a control tool. In most Arab countries, people know that there is nothing in the Quran about covering, the faces of women and so on. These things are inventions of powerful, non-feminist, misogynist regimes. Yeah. And they can use Judaism, and they do. They can use Christianity, and they did. They can use Islam, and they do. Not just in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, for example. Iran is a very progressive country in comparison to Saudi Arabia. Most professors in Iranian universities are women. Nobody ever thought, I think, that Iranian women should not be able to drive a car or to be holding a job or something. Iran is not like that. But Saudi Arabia was, until recently, exactly like that, and a lot of the others are still there. So religion in the 21st century is used as if we were living in the 11th century or even before. I think in Israel this explains quite a lot. And unfortunately, the media silence is bought with money, with putting the people that you want to silence. People are sacked from their positions. For example, even people in the right, not just left, but in the right of society, Tucker Carlson is not a socialist. He's a right wing and he's racist, and he was sacked from his job because he was seen to be too critical of Israel. So, a lot of the people that now tell us what is happening in Ukraine or in Iran or in Israel are right-wingers that left media channels to open their own, like Judge Napolitano and many others. Tucker Carlson is one of them. They lost their job in CNN, in SNBC, in all those companies, in Fox News. They lost their job there, and they now are even more popular than they were when they were at Fox News or at CNN. So this is a process of the big companies that are controlled by billionaires. Many of those billionaires are Zionists. Jewish Zionists, Christian Zionists, it doesn't matter, but they're Zionists. And they silence the media. In Britain, the BBC is not private, it's public, and therefore it's even worse that the BBC is a lie machine working for Israel. A lot of the people running it are Zionists. So the Prime Minister is Zionist, his government is Zionist. Every UK administration since 1916 was Zionist. The Americans only started supporting Israel in the 70s. The British supported it since 1916. All of them, every single British leading politician was Zionist. So I think that's where the silencing is coming from. It's coming from very powerful people, either those with money or those with power. I think that's all I can say. I can see already 4 hands, and
yes,
I would ask that you ask short questions, and I'll try and give short answers, because it's very late where I am.
Right. So I'm not going to get any more questions. These 4 people that are on the line, please ask brief questions, and Professor also give you a brief answer on that. So Luqman Nejad, please unmute yourself.
Go ahead. Professor Zabner, first, I'd like to thank you for your great scholarly presentation. My question is, you being a historian and considering different factors and most notably unanimous support of West for Israel, regardless of what they do in Gaza or in surrounding countries, from your perspective, I should say from your historical perspective, do you see any curious parallels between the history of Christian crusaders in 11th and 12th century and actually Christian Zionists of 21st century, considering that they may consider Israel as their vanguard, and at the end, if history has a way of repeating itself, do you envision that the same outcome that the Crusader had, meaning they were expelled from Holy Land, do you see such an ending, like Zionists go back to Brooklyn or London or wherever? Thank you very much.
Thank you for an excellent question. And I suspect that you know the answer because you already given it. The Israeli colonial project is a Crusader project. It's exactly operating as a Crusader project. In other words, the Crusaders were not politicians. They were occupiers. They were an army. They used violence. They took Jerusalem in the 11th century, and within 2 centuries, they were gone. I think the Israelis will not survive 2 centuries. These modern Crusaders will be rid of in the next 2 decades at most. I don't give them 2 decades. And I'm not the only one of historians that says this. My dear historian friends, all of them are of the same opinion, because a Crusader society lives on the sword, on power, on violence, and actually this is not a very good society to live in. I mean, imagine the Israelis started the war on Iran because they believed Netanyahu that he was talking about 4 days. I mean, how stupid can you be? If they spent 2 years fighting Hamas and did not manage to subdue it, Hamas is still there. It's weakened. Many people died, and they were replaced by younger people that came in. The same has happened with Hezbollah and the Houthis and so on. So if they have not managed to subdue Hamas in 2 years of the worst genocide of our lifetime, with all the arms, the modern arms that an empire gave them, how could they subdue Iran? What did they think when they started this war? Iran is a country of 92 million people. It's huge. It's one of the largest countries in Asia. It is rich in history. It is rich in so many ways. And it's an industrialized country and a modern country. What were they thinking about? So I think that they are Crusaders, and like the Crusaders, they left their homes in Europe without thinking, without having a plan. The plan was to do a regime change in Jerusalem in the end of the 11th century. And that's what they did. And then what? They didn't have a plan. So, by the way, Jerusalem, as part of the Arab world, was a modern city in comparison to Paris and London of the 11th century. These were really very backward cities. Baghdad was a modern city compared to European capitals. So they didn't have a plan. They didn't know what they wanted. They just wanted power and destruction. Taking Jerusalem meant killing all 60,000 people in Jerusalem. Together, they were killing Arab Muslims, Christians, and Jews in the same measure. They didn't even spare the Christians. So this was about death and destruction, like Israel is about death and destruction. Yes, they will not survive as much as the Crusades survived in Palestine. And in the Arab world, they are called the Crusaders. They are understood to be the Crusaders. So I think this is an excellent question that included the answer in it.
Thank you very much. Manouch, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Farshid. Thank you, Dr. Bresheeth. I enjoyed your talk. There are Iranians, I wouldn't say many, but there are, who even after 2 military attacks on Iran seek regime change by Israel and US, as you've referred to. They talk about human rights. They call for democracy, freedom, and then at the same time ask for bombardment of Iran and their people. There are those who associate themselves with cultural entities, yet fail to condemn bombing and ruining heritage sites. What is your message or plea to Iranians? And what are your hopes or worries about the outcome of the current situation? Thank you.
This is a very difficult question for me. Most of my friends in London are Iranians, very, very dear friends. They all have families in Iran. None of them supports this war. We don't differ very much. None of them is a great supporter of the Iranian government, but they are not silly or stupid, and they don't think that looking at history, Israel and the United States ever brought democracy to anywhere and anybody. The United States did regime change so many times. I don't know if anyone has made the final count of how many regimes they changed. None of those societies benefited from the regime. Did Pinochet bring democracy to Chile? Really? Did the Shah bring democracy to Iran? I think he brought Savak. I think you have to be really inhuman to support what Israel and the United States is doing to Iran. On what grounds could this be supported? The destruction of Tehran is going to help the people of Tehran? I'm not going to tell Iranians what to think. That's not my place. But I cannot see why anyone in their right mind is supporting this kind of genocide and destruction. What is this about? That you're supporting when you're supporting destruction. I mean, I know people here probably do not support this, but we all know people who do support it. I have never got an answer from them. In London, they stand together, the royalists stand together with the Israeli fascists and the British fascists. So they have three flags, the flag of Israel, the flag of St. George, or the flag of Britain, the UK, and the flag of the Shah. And all of them are Nazis and fascists. Is this the future that we want for Iran? I think this is mad. I don't think Iran needs these people. These people don't care about the civilians who die. The destruction of an amazing city, the destruction of an amazing culture, all in order to get rid of the government. I mean, it won't get rid of the government. It probably will make the government stronger. If people in Iran want freedom, they will achieve it. But not through the West, not through Israel. There is no interest in Israel in human rights of anybody. Can you imagine that the people that did the genocide in Gaza are interested in human rights? I'm stuck for words to describe the madness that anyone, last of course, an Iranian, can support what is now happening in the name of regime change and democracy. Oh, they kept changing. They said some of them want regime change. Some of them said it's nuclear weapons. Some of them said missiles. They kept changing the reasons because they don't have a reason. The reason is Israel wants it, so we've got to do it. That is the worst reason one can give.
Okay, Saeed, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bresheeth. I really appreciate your talk. I enjoyed it. And also, as my colleague, my friend, dear Manager mentioned, there are some people, they were hoping the combination of Netanyahu and Trump to come to Iran and bombard. And they call themselves elite of the society also. And they will go, they kiss their hands, because if they do that, and that was a kind of shame to me, and they are calling themselves as a humanitarian, whatever. So it's really bothered and really make me at least disappointed. Are these elite of the people? They are thinking that way, and etc. Now, since you asked that question, again, this is a combination of who? Netanyahu and Donald Trump. We know what they have done, and they are going to come and give us a gold. They are going to give us a democracy. I can't believe this. I want to come for ask you one other question, because they brought every question, but this question is very important because I hear a lot, and I think this is a lie also, because I hear this regime in Iran, they have killed 30,000, 60,000, 90,000 people, and that happened in just 2 nights. People, they came 2 nights. They came out for demonstration, and also we know after that, those people who they have been trained from Israelis, they came and they had all those, what to call, all those arsenal, whatever we want to call, against the people, to call to kill the people when they were doing demonstration, easy demonstration, and they were encouraging the other people to come also to engage with the demonstration. So these are what happened. What is your opinion? How many people they could have been killed if they were 2 nights only, and those time it was in the middle of the night, whatever, for a few hours, or let's put it 6-7 hours. Even it's going to be army to go to the war. They cannot kill in 2 days 60,000 people. Picture, Netanyahu has killed over 70,000 people in 2 years, and of course, more or less. So in 2 nights, they are getting 30, 60, 90,000. What is your opinion? And also, I call this one a kind of semi-coup. They were going to do that. They were going to plan that one, and they were going to coup on that plan. What's your thought and what's your opinion? I appreciate it. And also, before you answer, Mr. Farshi, there are some questions on the chat. Also, if you can just take attention, they have put those questions a long time ago. Thank you so much. I'm going to listen to your answers, please. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can't see the questions on the chat. I'll deal with that in a minute. Very briefly, you gave the reasons why these are lies. The Americans and the Israelis said quite openly at the highest level, the Mossad and CIA are behind all that. We are on the ground, said the Israelis. They use Israelis, but they also use Kurds and they used people from Afghanistan and other republics in Central Asia. What these people did is kill some of the protesters because the protests were not armed. You remember in the first 2 days, no one was killed. These were protests that even Pezeshkian supported. He came and he said, "You're right. Yes, we need to change. We need to free up the control and so on." So the government was actually in agreement with some of those people that were in the streets. But then the Americans and the Brits and the Brits as well, yeah, and the Israelis brought their armed gangs. And, you know, I heard this from Iranians who I know in Iran, who told me they're not supporters of the regime, but they told me what was happening, how it was happening. So we have to believe the Americans and the Israelis because they were proud. They thought that in a day or two they will bring the government down. By the way, they've done that in Ukraine. They've done that in a number of countries, yes. They've done it after 1991 in many countries in Europe. So they thought that it will be even easier in Iran. And they told us this. And Trump said to the Iranians, you know, bring the government down. Now we are helping you and help is coming and all that. The idea that they killed even 10,000 people is bizarre. It's not true. And the other thing is the Iranian government actually gave the names of people who died. 3,200 people were, you know, announced as having been killed, not by the government necessarily. Most of them, I'm sure, were killed by those gangs of the West, because you know, we know from the government itself, they admitted that at least 100 soldiers and policemen were killed. Mosques were burned, universities were burned, hospitals were destroyed. This is the behavior of people that want a democracy? I don't think so. This is a behavior of people who want chaos. Israel and US want chaos, and that's what they have done. And I think it's a terrible thing that 3,000 people died. But it's not a murder by the regime that did that. Of course, some people who, you know, didn't do anything apart from being on a demonstration died. The government admitted that. Pezeshkian admitted that people who were totally peaceful died in the chaos. Who created the chaos? Not the demonstrators. The demonstrators started political action, not a massacre. So I think I don't believe any of that. All those sums that people pull out of a hat are totally impossible. And you're right. If you compare it to Gaza, when you kill with bombs of 2,000 pounds bombs, and at most, the Israelis killed something like 800 people a day with those huge bombs. Of course, there was no use of airplanes in Iran. So how did these people, you know, kill 30,000, 50,000, 60,000, 90,000? You know, these are just nonsense. I think no one takes this seriously. And the people who speak about it know that it's a lie anyway. They themselves invented it.
Thank you very much. Okay, last question. Ms. Shahbazaz, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. What should we do? I want to hear your opinion about this right wing, like Carsten. We know how dangerous their views are, but at the same time, at this time, in this situation, talking about being anti-Israel. So should we take the little of whatever is useful and trash the rest, or or should we avoid listening and ignoring them totally? How should we take them? How should we handle them?
I'm not sure that I understood the question. It just the line is not very good, so I didn't hear very well. Could you?
I'm sorry, I will repeat it. How should we handle the right wing like Tucker Carlson, or people like him? We know how dangerous. I know the views are not. They are dangerous, right? But at this time, they are talking about, they are being kind of anti-Israel and talking about the against Israel, and how should we handle them?
Sorry, you're talking about the right wing, not in Iran. You're talking about the right wing in the United States. I think.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I myself am a Marxist. I stand on the left. I'm a pacifist. I'm against wars. So I come from that corner of the argument, yeah? And I think that right-wing views are problematic on the whole because they are anti-democratic. Of course, there are people on the left that are also anti-democratic, but I'm not one of them. So I think that when during the COVID, we have people on the right saying the COVID was an invention for the drug companies to make money and so on. You remember the kind of wave of theories that came up during the COVID and also later. I thought, like most people, that QAnon and the rest of them on the right are totally mad. They talked about different groups of the elite becoming pedophiles, using sexual aggression, all those things that in 2020, 21 were mainly just right-wing stories. However, since then, we all know about the Epstein files. We know that that behavior that QAnon was referring to actually did exist. So in the United States, there are people on the right and people on the left who are very close. Yeah, they are against the elites. Both of those groups are against the elites. The right have brought Trump second time to power because he said he will finish all the unnecessary wars. He will make America great again. He will be America first. And all those things, of course, he didn't do. He didn't finish any wars. Of course, he says he finished 8 or 9 wars. Most of those wars didn't even exist. Like he said, he finished the war between Albania and Azerbaijan. And Armenia, sorry, Albania and Armenia. Albania and Armenia are separated by 1,000 kilometers. So he finished all kind of wars in his head. He has not made America great again. He's just made America the enemy of every country by his tariffs. It didn't happen didn't help any American. The tariffs are paid by Americans. They pay more for what they buy. It doesn't actually help the Americans. How can this help the Americans? Anything that he promised, he did not deliver. So I think now MAGA and the right are against Trump. He was their heroes. He would resolve everything that capitalism got wrong, but actually he didn't, and he won't. And actually he started new wars instead of finishing wars like Ukraine that were started by the Democrats, by Joe Biden. So Trump is really one of the worst politicians that the world has ever seen. He's a Caligula. He's not a Democrat or Republican. He's an emperor with no clothes on. So the right now has a problem. They are against Trump. They know from the Epstein files that the Mossad is in control of not just the White House, but the elites in the United States and in other countries. And they don't like it, and I don't blame them. I don't like it either. So there is this very interesting process of the right and the left in the United States being in agreement. Tucker Carlson is one example. Scott Ritter is another. Judge Napolitano, John Mersheimer. These people are not left. They are on the right. They are nationalists. They come from the army and the intelligence community mainly, Pentagon and so on. But now, in comparison to Trump, they are Democrats. In other words, not Democrats of the Democratic Party, but they want democracy. They want a regime which is not corrupt. They want a regime which is not in the hands of billionaires. So there is a coming together of left and right. We don't see it politically yet, but in terms of topics and subjects, they are talking about the same things. And that's not a bad thing, I think. If those who are against the Western elite will get together and work out some kind of working together to get a better society, I think that's not bad. I don't know if it's possible. I don't trust people on the right, but then when I listen to the people I just mentioned, I agree with most of what Tucker Carlson is saying. He is now banned by the far right in America, because he's not playing the game. He is actually supporting Palestine. He's against the war in Iran. He's against the war in Ukraine. So he's changed a lot, and he's not the only one. So some of the right has moved to the left. This is odd, but it's not the first time this happens. There were periods like this in Europe as well. So I think if they are actually arguing for democracy and against plutocracy, against the billionaires class, against the Epstein class, you can work with them. This is not possible for them to work with Trump, but then the left can't work with Trump either. So they will not agree, for example, for Trump to become the Kaiser or the Tsar and call off the elections like some of his supporters want. These people will not agree to that. They believe in the American Constitution. They might be on the right, but they believe in the American Constitution. The American Constitution, on the whole, was written by right-wing people. So I might not support the right, But I think anyone who is supporting the Constitution is already a great improvement on a president who is illegal and is against laws not just of America, but international law and the law of any country.
Dr. Zabner, I know it's about 2:00 in London time.
It is indeed, yeah.
Right. So there are some questions. There is mostly in the chat. There are comments and these stuff. So I don't see much question. But if you want to look at some of them, and if you want to answer some of them, feel free to do that or not. We can close the meeting.
I think, you're right. Most of them are comments or were already dealt with by other questions. And I have to be in very few hours teaching a class. So I think I would like to end it at this point after 3 and a bit hours.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very informative, lots of questions, and you clear a lot of questions that our friends have in these. So thank you very much. So you are free to go and
thank you for inviting me, and I enjoyed all the questions. They were serious and they were important.
Sure. I hope we